So she's been military 4 years, first responder 4 years, and she has a very impactful story and is going to be talking about the importance of the Overwatch Collective and how we were able to get her into therapy after everything else failed. So without further ado, Caitlin. Woo!
I've never been this far west, so I was very surprised when I saw palm trees when I got off the plane. I'm really not a public speaker at all, so you guys have to bear with me. I'm nervous as hell up here. I wrote stuff down, but I have no idea if I'm going to actually stick to it or not. So, like Greg said, I've been in the Army National Guard, Missouri Army National Guard, for 4 years. I enlisted as a 68 Whiskey combat medic, and I also began my fire service journey around that same time. I originally started as a volunteer in early 2020, and then was lucky enough to transition to full-time career firefighting in 2022. As I'm sure many of us are all too familiar with, there is a stigma that surrounds mental health in both the first responder and military communities. One key contributor to this stigma is the fear of being found unfit for duty or unfit to continue serving if one receives mental health treatment. While many departments and units have implemented systems such as EAP or peer support, these are still falling short of addressing that fear and bridging that gap. And unfortunately, in my own experience, I was failed by the same system that I was supposed to trust. I'm going to try and keep the story short for the sake of time. There's a lot of details I'm going to try and leave out here. In early 2022, I was participating in a live-in program with the volunteer fire department, where I was a resident and would work part-time while going to college. While I was there, a good friend and fellow firefighter tragically took his own life. This loss completely devastated me. I was encouraged by my department to go see the EAP therapist that they had contracted with. With much reluctance, I attended therapy for only a couple of sessions before that therapist moved and left the practice, leaving me to deal with my trauma and my grief on my own. As you can imagine, there was not much healing happening, and instead, I was just dealing with it, whatever way I knew how. After falling into a depressive episode following my friend's death, my department concluded that I was not pulling my own weight, and I soon found myself only a few short weeks after my friend's passing, removed from the department and left virtually homeless. No one cares, work harder. That's the quote that was preached to me more times than I can count. I guess it's the military mindset. But I did just that. I picked myself up, I dusted myself off, and I kept pushing forward. After a few of the toughest months, I was hired by a full-time city fire department in the fall of 2022. At the time, this was a dream come true. I had wanted nothing more than to do firefighting as a career, and to be hired on my first try at a department of this magnitude was, in my mind, kind of like winning the lottery. While I was thriving on the outside, I was still just dealing on the inside. I became an expert at what we all do best as first responders and service members, this lovely skill that we call compartmentalizing. I initially took that leap and began to work with this new department's therapist. They had a therapist that they had contracted with their union peer support team. I was provided with up to 4 sessions fully funded, but after those were up, I was not in a financial spot where I could afford to continue sessions. The internal struggles that I tried to keep hidden from everyone else and even myself at times began to become even more apparent when the nightmares and insomnia made their appearance. At this time, I knew something needed to change, but I didn't know what. I confided in my military company commander, who assisted me in reaching out for help. This included our state's National Guard behavioral health team, as well as the 988 Veterans Crisis Line. Unfortunately, my experience with the 988 Veterans Line was not a very pleasant one. The lady that we spoke with was rather rude, confrontational, and continued to push for my commander to take me to the hospital, all without giving me a chance to explain what was really going on or any part of my story. My commander later made a report of our experience to the state's behavioral health team and was required to initiate a commander's critical information report, which I'm sure some of you military members are familiar with, which ultimately resulted in me being placed on a profile that prevented me from carrying or utilizing a firearm, which when you're a service member or law enforcement basically means you're not trusted to do your job. I continued to struggle in silence, terrified of any additional consequences I would face if I spoke up. After some time, I found myself in a pretty dark spot and made the decision to confide in both an Army chaplain and my fire captain at the time. The chaplain knowingly broke confidentiality and reported me to the behavioral health team yet again. When I confided in my captain, he made an effort to try and get me connected with someone from the department's peer support team. The peer support team member, in turn, went behind my back and spoke with that contracted therapist that I had seen previously for 4 sessions. This therapist then told the peer support team member and my captain that I was a danger to myself and needed to be escorted to the ER without ever having talked to me. In an effort to keep the story short, I'll continue to spare you some of the details, but this ultimately resulted in a 5150 where I spent 96 hours involuntarily admitted into a psych ward. After I was discharged from the hospital, I was required to be seen and evaluated by my department's contracted doctor. This doctor would not schedule me for an exam until I was able to provide a return to work letter from my own civilian psychiatrist. This led to the seemingly impossible task of locating a psychiatrist that had openings or even accepted my insurance. After about 4 weeks of having no such luck, I was terminated by my department for a failure to comply with a reasonable department directive. This left me in an even more vulnerable state of mental health, and I was lucky enough to be referred to a facility called the IAFF Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence is a residential behavioral health treatment facility specifically for firefighters that are IAFF union members. I spent 42 days at this facility that we fondly call the COE, and it saved my life. I found the true meaning of brotherhood and sisterhood there, in spite of the betrayal I had experienced by the so-called brotherhood back home. Upon my return home, I found myself still in a tough spot. I was struggling to provide for myself both physically and financially, and working on my mental health was not even close to being in the picture. The same day that I was terminated from my department, I was notified of the military's intent to refer me to a medical evaluation board, which would determine my eligibility to continue serving. Due to my lack of aftercare, I quickly found myself slipping into the same dark spot I had been in just months prior. I wish I could remember exactly how I found talk, but I'm beyond grateful that I found it when I did. I can't tell you exactly what time I sent that first email, but I can tell you that it was very late at night, and I still received a reply within 60 minutes of hitting that send button. The process was extremely smooth, and from my end appeared to be seamless. I was connected with a culturally competent therapist who not only understood the military and first responder community, but also 100% respected my confidentiality, a promise that had been made to me in the past and broken to me in the past. I was later diagnosed with PTSD and OCD, and finally felt like I had found the help and the support that I had been searching for the last 2 years. Shortly after beginning therapy with my new provider, I was hired onto a new department and began to piece my life back together. I'm still undergoing a military medical evaluation board, but the support that I now have throughout this whole process is absolutely unmatched. Like I said before, I can confidently say that I am standing here tonight telling my story to all of you because of the help that I received from the Overwatch Collective. I know what it's like to be in that dark place where it feels like there is no way out. Our culture loves to say, let me know if you need anything, or reach out to someone if you need help. But that's the thing. How are you supposed to trust reaching out and asking for help when that same system has a history of failing its members? What Greg and Jesse are doing here with the Overwatch Collective is absolutely amazing. In the military, they like to teach the problem-solving process as identifying the issue, then addressing said issue. And that's exactly what you guys are doing here with Talk. You identify the overwhelmingly large issue at hand and are doing a fantastic job of addressing it. I couldn't be more proud of the mission that you stand for, and I also couldn't be more grateful for the help that I have received from this organization. Thank you.